Olivia is an Anglican priest who, during her ministry at St Hilary's Kew, was the catalyst for one of Melbourne's very early new missional communities or fresh expressions of church, in establishing Solus, which is a name that I'm sure that most people around the place have heard. She was also a leading contributor to the group called Catalyst Innovations, which was seeking to help churches develop sustainable contemporary approaches to mission and ministry. She now works as General Manager of Mission Development for Baptcare. And I know one of the deep passions of her heart is helping Baptcare to re-embrace its deep roots within the Baptist principles of mission and ministry. And that this passion has become core to her ongoing work of culture change within an organisation as large and complex as Baptcare. Olivia, we are so grateful that you're willing to come and share your story with us. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and the honour is all mine to be here with you. I've gone low-tech today, so there's a piece of paper on your table with a black and white printout on it. I will mostly be talking about the lessons I learnt developing Solace, but what I want to say as a General Manager of Mission Development for Baptcare is we are absolutely keen to build the future with you and to contribute everything that we can. And we see that the next 3 or 4 years are really difficult transition ones for us. We're doing well in that transition, but then we really will start to see some scale in our organisation, and we are very ambitious to double in size in the next 5 to 7 years, because we believe that faith-based organisations have to stay in welfare so that the Australian Fair Go can survive. So we're not growing for growth's sake, and as we do scale and have more resources, we want to pump a lot more of them into the church. So David Barker is here all day, and I believe he's just stepped out. Oh, I so didn't plan this, but he is here all day. Please talk to him about ways you can partner with us. Partnership and collaboration is definitely on our hearts with you. So let me begin with one of my favourite parts of Paul's writing, Galatians chapter 5. For freedom, Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery. Listen, I, Paul, am telling you that if you let yourselves be circumcised, Christ will be of no benefit to you. Once again, I testify to every man who lets himself be circumcised that he is obliged to obey the entire law. You who want to be justified by the law have cut yourselves off from Christ. You have fallen away from grace. For through the Spirit, by faith, we eagerly wait for the hope of righteousness. For in Christ Jesus, neither circumcision nor uncircumcision counts for anything. The only thing that counts is faith working through love. If my theological framework could be summed up in a bumper sticker, which I sincerely hope it can't, but if it could, that bumper sticker would be transforming grace. And it's out of trying to go deeper in understanding verses like that and asking myself, what is the circumcision and law of today that is binding people and that may well be binding our churches and our church systems? And what does grace look like in a new missional context in inner urban Melbourne, where every small set of shops has a yoga studio but none have a church? And so Solace really was a work of taking the principles of transforming grace as deeply as I could understand them and learning from others and really creating a new ecclesiology, a new missiology, and working very hard at that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Solace. I am going to spend a lot of time talking about what I've learned, because I think that's where we meet. So it did begin in 2000, and I need to tell you, in its current form that we envisaged it, it is actually disbanding now. I believe that there's some powerful seeds that will be of value in the future, but now is very much a time of endings. It was a postmodern missional experiment, and when I talk to the people I live next door from and across the street from, I would describe it as a cross between church, as they might think of it, yoga, and a cafe. At the core of it were 7 ways of experiencing and entering relationship with God and his people. Things such as the way of the word, the way of justice, the way of contemplation, the way of the spirit, the way of the everyday, and so on. And they were experience-based, and it was all about belonging first. Come and find meaning. Come and explore what meaning in your world looks like and hear some stories of Jesus, and then you might experience the incarnate word and the living God. So it's all experience-based. Come on a justice walk with us and you might experience the God of justice and his people. Come and do a prayer labyrinth with us and you might experience the God of silence and love and grace. So experience-based, belonging first and behaviour and belief second, and usually belief last. So very messy. So I'm not going to say more about it. Jude Waldron, we were fortunate enough to have Jude on our staff and Jude and James in our community for a number of years. So if you want to hear more about the specifics of Solace, you can speak with me, and especially I'll be at the dinner tonight, but you can absolutely talk with Jude. Is that okay? Yeah, totally. Thanks. I didn't prep her. So some of our strengths, and this is just my thoughts. It was a genuine missional reinvention focused on grace and in everything, in the governance, in how we employed people, in how we welcomed people, in everything we did missionally and in ministry. It enabled hundreds to mature in their faith and gave hope to many. It only brought a handful to Christ, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. It was an absolutely excellent witness to grace, and many, many people came and were part of the things that we were doing and would go away with this kind of thing, well, if that's what the church is meant to be and if that's what Jesus' people are on about, well, that's really changed what I think. However, the great weight of popular views about the church and church behaviours, of course, stack up against that still quite unfavourably. Our weaknesses, we struggled for sustainability. We didn't scale. Partly, it was very late in the piece that we kind of got the energy to scale, and the preference of a lot of the people who were part of it was not to. And I think that was a leadership failure of mine, that we didn't push through that. And at times we moved about quite a bit, and at times our connections to community were too weak. Some of our best connections to community were when we were actually co-located in an Anglican church, which brought its own difficulties, but I think those connections were too weak, and we had to keep building them all the time. So that's really all I want to actually say specifically about Solace. And then with the rest of my time, and you'll see 3 boxes there, I just want to talk about lessons learnt, because I think, again, that's really what we share here today. So I've described it as a crucifixion experience. A crucifixion and resurrection experience is what I should have written there. An Easter journey all the time. And I have to honestly say, I doubt I would have done it if I had known the cost. And we are blessedly saved by being located in time, I think, and unable to see how hard things are. Now that I'm in a different season with it, I'm so grateful and thankful for the journey, but there were just incredibly difficult times. In the end, for me, as I moved out of leading it 3 or 4 years ago and handed it on to some other people, I came to understand at most that really it was a gift back to God. At the heart of it, that's what it was for me. And that's what kept me in all those years, about 12 years of my life, really investing deeply. And it was all about the experience of grace that I have with God, and wanting therefore to make everything in my ministry and ministry and sphere of influence and control as close to shining a light on that or pulsing with that grace as I possibly could, and not being content for the cognitive dissonance between a message that we might give and everything else that we might do. So I think I did best when I leaned into it fully, knowing that it's an Easter journey, knowing that there is Thursday night and the abandonment, that there is Friday, that there is the torture and the torture of the cross and the abandonment, that there is Saturday in the grave, and there is Easter Sunday. And Mark's Gospel is my favourite Gospel, and Mark's Gospel ends with the women running away afraid. So even, I don't mean to be too bleak, but even Resurrection Sunday, with all its power and joy and hope, frightens people, and people run away unable to assimilate it. And, sometimes your success and sometimes the profundity of what you're trying to do and the change you're trying to bring and the life it brings is as scary as the hard times. So therefore I say lean into it fully. And this is something that I think the traditional church over the centuries can teach us. The traditional church learnt this cycle and mimicked it through rituals and deliberate spiritual disciplines that they took on, both of celebration and of hard times. So I invite you to have your own cycles and death and resurrection practices. Have your times of silence. Have your times of withdrawing and journaling. Have your times of being broken down by a trusted advisor or friend, be that a spiritual director as it is in my case or others, in the presence of God. Have those really important times and choose them. And also then have and look for the resurrection times, the genuine celebrations, the times with trusted friends where you can weep and laugh together about how hard it's been and totally be yourself and just delight in the joy of what you find yourself in the stream of the amazing work that God is doing. And I think also coming out of grace and coming out of the heart of what the Easter journey is all about, I think we must forgive ourselves and others completely. And in my life, I found that to be not an easy thing to do deeply, but I've found incredible freedom. And in those moments where we are in the spiritual flow, where we know the love and presence of God, where we feel like we are connected to eternity, I always find in those moments the bitterness or the pains that I'm carrying are gone and they do not matter. So I try and carry that sense always with me of the future of heaven fully come, of heaven and earth fully united, because it doesn't matter the things that I'm carrying. And that really helps me to forgive deeply and completely others and myself. So just a few things then I'd like to talk about in terms of leadership and change, and just those last 2 boxes there, and then I'll finish with another part of Scripture that has been just a source of strength. I'm sure at every era we need our apostles, but we certainly need them now. And if you believe that we're now in a dynamic of constant change is the new reality in first world, global, internet-driven, post-everything, post-modern, post-colonial, post-industrial, you name it, constant change. Not just that we're changing into something that will become stable, that is gone. So we must have apostles. Now, this is a huge challenge for the church that I was ordained into, the Anglican Church, but I believe it also is in the Baptist Church with your very different structures, because apostles are anti-institutional by their very nature. So I leave that with you. Let us speak of that together. How do we solve that? But we need apostles. Now, I actually think in Solace as a leader, I was quite apostolic. I was fortunate to have staff and others who were prophetic, and we grew in justice, and that I grew in justice as well. The hardest thing for us was evangelists who could really dig into the new ecclesiology that we were developing and the continuum for us in our lifestyles, in our spiritual ways, you know, the way of the word, the way of contemplation that leads all the way to mission and evangelism, and then all the way back to profound, mature discipleship. We did pretty well with pastors and teachers living out this new model, and that's because that's the strength of the Anglican Church and much of the people who were trained and leaders who came to us. And so actually adapting pastors and teachers into our new model was our easiest thing. Something I've really learnt coming to Baptcare, which I wish I had done at Solace, was work on the mission and work on the church, not in it. Now that demands a certain overhead that we feel we don't have, but you must do it. You've got to work on it. You've got to step back and say, Lord, you know, what are you doing? And you've got to have people who can do the big picture with you. And you've got to say, you know, what seeds is the Spirit planting now for 5 years, for 10 years? What kind of practices and behaviours do we absolutely have to change for all time to keep pace with constant change? You know, how do we become a community that is led by apostles? You know, and they're these big questions that they are so important, and we didn't achieve sustainability really at Solace because I didn't step back and work on it. I was always in it. And so I really just want to say, make that time somehow. Find friends, find champions, and create a tribe. You've got to have friends, you've got to have safe people, and you've got to have champions, especially in the Aussie culture. We cannot say good things about ourselves. Let's just accept that. We cannot do that. Other cultures can, and that's great that they can. We need champions who say great things about leaders around us who are anti-tall poppies, who are encouragers, and we've got to get them. So be one for someone and find one for yourself. I think we've got to make the big, hard decisions. I was just talking with a business that recently has made redundant 25% of its workforce. However, it has not come out of that with a vision for the future, and it is only at break even financially. They did not make a big enough, hard enough decision. They've had a halfway bit of pain, and they haven't fixed their problem, and they're not growing with a vision for the future. We do this all the time. We do, you know, just a little bit. We do not have time for continuous improvement. We do not have time for incremental change. The Spirit is the best entrepreneur, innovator, disruptor in the cosmos. And the Spirit is calling us to disruptive change and big, hard decisions. So I think know that you are deeply aligning with God's heart when you're doing those things. Know yourself, like really know yourself, and be really honest, and find people who are honest, and do what you're good at, and let someone else do the other stuff, please. All of us are good at some things, great, and we're the body of Christ, and God's made it that way. And we have to stop doing the things that we're really bad at, because it's holding up change. Something else I didn't do well enough, I find it hard to ask other people to sacrifice. And part of knowing myself is knowing deeply where that comes from in my story. But this last point on this square, shamelessly and passionately recruit sacrificial involvement. I now see it as a gift, because I don't regret the sacrificial involvement that I've given, because it was my gift back to God for the grace and love that God has shown me. How can I keep that from someone else? And so now I'm really excited, say, in my role at Baptcare. If you come and get involved with us, and if we get in partnership together, you will not regret it. It will be costly. We won't get everything right. It's going to be really hard, but it's going to be fantastic. So I think we just need to absolutely, passionately call that sacrifice out of people. It's absolutely countercultural, and it's the best thing, best gift we could ever give anyone. Just a couple of other things. Learn from the best thinkers. Often we only read Christian thinkers. You have the Christian framework you need. Go and learn from some people right outside the box, and with trusted friends with great theological frameworks. Understand how it comes to life in mission and ministry. Plan for 10 years, not one. We absolutely overestimate what we can do in 1 year and kill ourselves. And then the next year, we absolutely overestimate what we can do in 1 year and kill ourselves. And then the next year, you know what I'm saying. So plan for 10 years and really, really plan for 10 years. Really say to people, we will do that at year 3. We will do that at year 5. Stay in the ambiguity with me. Yes, we're going to course correct all the time and the Spirit's leading and we don't know what the future is and it's not a blueprint. We've only got North Star. We've only got touchstones. We haven't got a blueprint. But here's where we think we'll go and here's how we develop it. Rely deeply on God and develop resilience because, just that last one down there, you're going to need to get used to personal attacks and being put outside the circle of belonging. And so I want to finish with Hebrews because in Hebrews we're called to go with Christ outside the holy city of Jerusalem. And the bit I want to read is a couple of bits from chapter 12. And I think the acknowledgement of service this morning and those who've passed on just sets the setting beautifully for these verses. Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith, who, for the sake of the joy that was before him, endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God. And down in verse 12, this is the bit that keeps us going. The joy of what's before us and this. Therefore, lift your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees and make straight paths for your feet so that what is lame may not be put out of joint, but rather be healed. When I first read that, I went, hang on a minute. Jesus is saying, as I join him in the marathon, that is the gospel invitation. That is the total transformation of my being. That is participating in the transformation of this planet and this cosmos, whatever that means. I'm lame now, but boy, do I feel that. But as I enter that and walk, I will be healed. And that is our hope. Thank you.